In the quiet town of Willowbrook, where the leaves turned a golden hue in autumn, painting the streets with a canvas of nature's own brush, I, James, lived a life one might describe as the epitome of artistic success. My wife, Clara, was an artist whose canvases adorned the walls of galleries from New York to Paris. Her strokes were bold, her colors vibrant, and her themes, a deep dive into the human psyche, had made her a celebrated name in contemporary art circles. I, on the other hand, was the curator of Willowbrook's local museum, a role I took with as much pride as one might take in their own creation. Our house, an old Victorian with high ceilings and light that seemed to dance through the stained glass windows, was our sanctuary. It was here that Clara painted, her studio a sacred space where time seemed to stand still. I would often watch her, mesmerized by the way her hands moved, as if she was not just painting but channeling the very essence of her subjects onto the canvas. But lately there had been a shift, not in her art, which continued to evolve, but in her. There was a new light in her eyes, a secretive smile that I couldn't quite decipher. She'd spend long hours in her studio, the door now locked, a silence filled with secrets. I told myself it was the creative process, her art demanding more of her solitude. Yet, there was an undercurrent of change, a subtle alteration in our daily life that I couldn't ignore. It was at one of our town's art galas, where Clara's latest piece was unveiled, that I first met Theo. He was an art critic, known for his sharp tongue and even sharper insights, capable of elevating or annihilating a career with a single article. His presence was magnetic, drawing everyone into his orbit with his charm and erudite commentary. He and Clara shared a moment discussing her painting, their laughter mingling with the soft clinks of champagne glasses. I watched from a distance, feeling an unfamiliar knot tighten in my stomach. As the night waned, I noticed how Theo's gaze lingered on Clara longer than necessary, how he whispered something into her ear that made her cheeks flush. I dismissed it as professional admiration, yet a seed of doubt was planted. The days following the gala seemed to confirm my growing suspicions. Clara was different, more animated, her mind often elsewhere. She spoke of Theo with a reverence that was reserved for the greats in art history, yet there was an intimacy in her tone that spoke of something more personal. Theo's reviews of Clara's work began appearing in magazines, each one more glowing than the last. His words painted Clara not just as an artist but as a visionary, a narrative that seemed to bolster her confidence, yet it also seemed to distance her from me. We shared fewer meals. Our conversations about art became less about our shared passion and more about her individual achievements. I started to observe her more intently, the way one might study a piece of art to understand its true essence. Her studio door, once open to my casual visits, was now a boundary, a symbol of the space growing between us. The sounds of her brush strokes, once a melody to my ears, now felt like notes of a song played in a language I was beginning to forget. One evening, while Clara was out with Theo, supposedly discussing an upcoming exhibition, I found myself in her studio. The space was filled with her scent, a mix of oil paints and the lavender she always wore. Her latest work, still in progress, lay on the easel, a stark departure from her usual style. It was raw, almost chaotic, with splashes of color that seemed to scream rather than speak. I didn't touch anything, but my eyes caught a sketchbook lying open on her desk. The sketches were intimate, not of the usual subjects but of moments, of laughter, of shared glances that were unmistakably between two people deeply connected. My heart sank as I recognized Theo in those strokes, not just as a critic but as an inspiration, perhaps something more. The realization that her art was now reflecting another life, one I was not part of, hit me like a cold wave. Yet, I kept my composure, my mind racing with questions but my face a mask of the supportive husband I had always been. Days stretched into weeks, and the whispers of doubt in my mind grew louder. Clara's schedule became erratic. Late nights turned into absences from home with no clear explanation. When she was home, there was a new energy around her, a vitality that seemed foreign to the life we had built together. I began to delve into the art world more than ever, not just as a curator but as an observer of human behavior. Art, after all, was not just about the creator but also about the observer. I attended more exhibitions, listened to more critiques, and in each one, I sought Theo's words, his influence, trying to read between the lines for any sign of their relationship. It was at one such event, a small gathering in a gallery known for its avant-garde selections, that I saw them, Clara and Theo, standing too close, their conversation too low for others to hear but loud enough for me to see the intimacy in their shared laughter. The art around them seemed to fade. The only piece that stood out was the one they were creating with their proximity, their shared glances. I left the gallery early that night, the cold air biting as I walked back to our home. My mind was a whirl of emotions, each one fighting for dominance. Anger, betrayal, sadness, but above all, a need for truth. At home, I waited up, the house silent except for the ticking of the clock, each second a reminder of the time slipping away from us. When Clara returned, her eyes bright, her smile still lingering from whatever joy she had found with Theo, I didn't confront her. Instead, I asked about her night, my voice steady, my heart in turmoil. She spoke of the exhibition, of Theo's insights, but there was a gloss over her words, a veneer of truth that didn't quite match the reality I had glimpsed. That night, lying in bed, I felt the chasm between us widen. I knew then that my doubts were not just whispers but a growing roar, demanding to be addressed. Yet, I chose patience to gather more than just suspicions, to understand the full picture before the canvas of our marriage could be judged. The days after that evening were a blur of routine, but beneath the surface, a tempest was brewing. Clara's art continued to evolve, her pieces now carrying a new intensity, a hidden pain or perhaps joy that I wasn't part of. I watched her work from afar, each brush stroke seeming to tell a story I was no longer privy to. I decided to delve deeper into her world, not just through observation but by engaging more directly with the art community. I attended workshops, lectures, and any event where I might encounter Theo or hear more about their dynamic. It was at one such workshop, themed around the emotional impact of color, where I overheard a conversation that turned my suspicions into near certainty. Two artists were discussing Clara's recent work, one of them mentioning how Theo's influence was evident, not just in her art but in her life. They spoke of a closeness that was more than professional, hinting at a bond that had stirred the art scene's gossip mills. I felt a sting, not just of betrayal but of being the last to know or perhaps the last to admit what was happening. Back home, I started to look for signs, small pieces of evidence that might confirm what my heart was slowly accepting. In Clara's studio, now a temple of secrets, I found more sketches, more intimate than before, capturing moments that were clearly not meant for public eyes. The evidence was subtle, but to me, it was as loud as a scream in the quiet of our home. That evening, I confronted Clara, not with accusations but with questions about her happiness, her art, and Theo. Her responses were evasive, filled with platitudes about artistic inspiration and the need for personal growth. There was a truth in her words, but it was veiled, much like her art now seemed to veil her true feelings. The confrontation left me with more doubts than answers, but it also set me on a path I hadn't anticipated. I became a detective in my own life, looking for truth in the shadows of our shared existence. It was during one of these searches, while Clara was away for what she claimed was an art residency, that I found the undeniable proof. In her studio, hidden beneath a pile of old canvases, was a letter. It was from Theo, the handwriting flamboyant, matching his personality. The words were those of lovers, speaking of stolen moments, shared dreams, and a future they envisioned together. The letter was not from today or yesterday but dated back months, suggesting this affair had been a silent undercurrent in our life for longer than I'd realized. I sat with the letter, the paper heavy in my hands, the words burning into my memory. The betrayal was no longer a suspicion but a confirmed reality. My heart felt hollow, but my mind was clear. This was not just about a broken marriage but about a betrayal of trust, of the life we had built together. I didn't let my emotions cloud my actions. Instead, I began to document everything: dates, events, the shift in Clara's art, all correlating with Theo's presence in our lives. I needed more than just personal pain. I needed a narrative, a story to tell, one that would expose the truth in a way that could not be denied. With the truth laid bare, my initial reaction was anger, a desire for immediate confrontation, but I knew that would only lead to public scandal and personal ruin for all involved, including myself. Instead, I turned to strategy, to art itself, for my revenge. I started by revisiting my knowledge of art history, particularly the stories of artists who had used their craft to exact revenge or expose truths. From Caravaggio's dark tales to the subtle jabs of Toulouse-Lautrec, I drew inspiration. But I needed something modern, something that would resonate in our contemporary art world. I began to paint, not with brushes but with plans. I studied Clara's techniques, her style, until I could mimic it. I started creating forgeries, pieces that looked like they could have come from her hand but carried my own hidden messages. Each painting was a chapter of our story, a narrative of betrayal told through art. I set up a series of these works to be discovered by a fake art collector I invented, someone with enough clout to make the art world take notice. I used my position at the museum to authenticate these pieces, planting seeds of doubt about their origin, suggesting they might be Clara's recent, secret works. The plan was to unveil these at an exhibition where Clara's actual new work would be shown. The exhibition would be a celebration of her art, but it would also be where her betrayal would be artistically exposed. I knew it would be risky, potentially career-ending for all involved, but my heart was set on a revenge that was as artistic as it was personal. As I worked, my nights were long, filled with the quiet of my own thoughts and the silent whispers of betrayal. I was not just crafting art. I was crafting my response to a life turned upside down, a narrative where justice, or at least my version of it, would be served through the very medium that had once united us. With each brush stroke, I felt a mix of bitterness and artistry, channeling my emotions into the forgeries. I had always admired Clara's ability to evoke emotion through her art, and now, I was using that same skill to tell our story, or rather, the story of our unraveling. The paintings I created were not just copies but interpretations, each one subtly different, hinting at the hidden narrative beneath the surface. I named this series The Unseen, a collection that would ostensibly reflect Clara's exploration of hidden truths in human life, but in reality, it was my portrayal of our concealed marital discord. Each piece was crafted with meticulous care, ensuring they could be mistaken for Clara's work. Yet there were signatures in the style, color choices, and even hidden figures within the brushwork that told a different tale. I had to be careful. The art world was small, critique was sharp, and the truth could unravel everything before the final reveal. So, I created a backstory for these forgeries, suggesting they were part of an early, experimental phase of Clara's career, lost and only recently rediscovered. I planted this narrative through anonymous tips to art enthusiasts and collectors, creating a buzz about mysterious new Clara works. The forgeries were not just about revenge. They were my way of coping, of finding beauty in the chaos of betrayal. In the solitude of my work, I found a strange peace, a place where I could express what words could not. The announcement of the exhibition came like a storm, swift and all-encompassing. The unveil, Clara's latest masterpieces, was set to be the event of the season, hosted at one of the most prestigious galleries in the city. The invitation list was exclusive, filled with names from the art, critique, and collector circles, including Theo, whose presence was crucial to my plan. Clara was ecstatic, her eyes alight with the thrill of recognition, unaware of the undercurrents of my scheme. She spoke passionately about her new series, Echoes of Emotion, which would be the star of the show. Her work had never been more personal, she claimed, and in a way she was right, though not in the sense she believed. I took charge of the logistics, ensuring that my forgeries would be displayed alongside her genuine pieces. The contrast would be subtle at first glance but would grow more apparent upon closer inspection. I even arranged for a piece from The Unseen to be the centerpiece, its placement strategically chosen to draw the most attention. As the date approached, I felt a mix of dread and anticipation. I had woven a narrative through art, a narrative of betrayal and revenge, but I was also risking my own reputation, my career, my life as I knew it. Yet, the thought of Clara's art, her name, being part of this artistic reckoning gave me a resolve I hadn't known I possessed. The setup of the exhibition was an elaborate dance of deception. I coordinated with the gallery's staff under the guise of ensuring everything went smoothly for Clara's big night. I placed each painting with precision, the forgeries interspersed with her real work, creating a visual dialogue between the two. I ensured that the lighting accentuated the subtle differences, the hidden messages in my work that would challenge the viewer's perception of authenticity. I invited a select group of art historians and forensic art analysts, under the pretense of celebrating Clara's evolution as an artist, but truly, they were there to unknowingly validate my forgeries. I knew their expertise would eventually lead them to question the origin of some pieces, igniting the conversation I wanted. I also planted seeds of doubt through a series of anonymous posts on art blogs and forums, hinting at a scandal brewing in the art scene, without explicitly naming names. This created a buzz, a sense of anticipation or perhaps dread, among the attendees. I wanted the evening to start with whispers, to set the stage for the dramatic reveal. Theo was to be my final touch, his presence crucial. I ensured he was seated where his reactions could be observed by many. His reputation as a critic would either validate or condemn the narrative I had painted. I knew his ego would lead him to comment on the works, and I anticipated his shock when he realized he was part of the art he was critiquing. As the night of the exhibition neared, I felt like an artist standing before his masterpiece, not just of canvas and paint, but of strategy and emotion, ready to unveil not just art, but the truth beneath it. The anticipation was palpable, not just in the air but within me, a storm waiting to break. The night before the exhibition was charged with an electric current of anticipation. Clara was in high spirits, her excitement palpable as she reviewed her pieces one last time. I watched her, a part of me still caught in the admiration of her dedication to her craft, even if it was now intertwined with my plan for vengeance. She spoke of Theo, of how he had promised to be there early, his critique essential to her night's success. I nodded, my smile a mask for the storm within. I barely slept, my mind racing through every scenario, every possible outcome. My studio, now filled with the tools of my revenge rather than the art I once loved creating, felt like a war room. I checked my notes, the forgeries, the plan. There was no room for error. Too much was at stake. In the quiet of our home, I contemplated the cost of what I was about to do, not just to Clara but to myself. I was about to expose a personal tragedy in the most public of ways, using art as my weapon. Yet there was no turning back. The betrayal had been too profound, the need for some form of justice too strong. The morning came with a sense of inevitability. Clara was up early, her energy infectious, unaware of the shadow about to cast over her world. I helped her with the final preparations, each moment feeling like the calm before a storm. The gallery was transformed, the air thick with the scent of wine and anticipation. Guests arrived in waves, their chatter a low hum that grew to a buzz as they admired the art. Clara was radiant, moving through the crowd, her laughter a melody amidst the clinking of glasses. I stayed close, observing, waiting for the moment. The art critics, collectors, and influencers were all there, including Theo, who made his entrance with the confidence of someone who knew his words could define the evening. He greeted Clara with a familiarity that did not escape the notice of those around them, fueling my resolve. As the night progressed, I mingled, subtly guiding conversations towards the new, mysterious pieces from the unseen. I watched as interest grew, questions were asked, and the art historians I had invited began their analysis. The forgeries were studied, compared to Clara's known style, and the whispers of doubt started. The moment came when Theo, ever the critic, stood before the centerpiece of the unseen. His initial admiration faded as he leaned closer, his eyes catching the subtle discrepancies, the hidden narrative within the painting. His reaction was everything I had hoped for. Confusion, then realization, followed by a look towards Clara that was less admiration and more accusation. As the room's attention was drawn to Theo's reaction, I stepped forward, a microphone in hand, a gesture that was both theatrical and necessary. The crowd quieted, their eyes on me, the curator, the husband, the artist in his own right. Tonight, we gather not only to celebrate art, but to witness truth. I began, my voice steady, my heart racing. What you see here is not just the work of Clara but also an exploration of deceit, of betrayal, and of truth hidden in plain sight. I explained the forgeries, how they were my creation, a narrative of our personal story, one of love turned to betrayal. I unveiled the hidden messages, the signs of Theo's influence, the sketches, and finally, the letter I had found. The room was silent, the art now a backdrop to the personal drama unfolding. Clara's face went from confusion to horror as she understood the implications. Theo's reputation, his career, was now under the same scrutiny as hers. The art world, so quick to judge and elevate, was now witnessing a fall from grace. I finished with, art, they say, is a reflection of life. Tonight we've seen a reflection of betrayal, and perhaps justice through art. The room erupted in murmurs, debates, and the sharp clicks of cameras capturing the moment. The exhibition turned from a celebration to a scandal, the art now seen in a new light, not just as pieces to admire but as pieces of evidence in a very public personal vendetta. I felt a mix of relief and sorrow, having achieved my aim but at what cost to all of us involved. The atmosphere in the gallery shifted from one of art appreciation to one of scandal. Whispers turned into open discussion, and the art historians I had invited were now at the forefront, dissecting each piece with a new understanding. The forgeries were no longer just curious anomalies but evidence of a personal and professional betrayal. Clara stood amidst the crowd, her face a canvas of shock and then despair. The art that had once been her refuge was now the very thing that was tearing her down. Theo, caught in the crossfire, was equally distressed, his influence now a liability rather than an asset. His critiques, once sought after, were now questioned, his integrity under scrutiny. The media, always eager for a story, had their cameras pointed not at the art but at the people behind it. Headlines would soon scream of the scandal in the art world, of the curator who used art for revenge, of the artist whose personal life was now as public as her paintings. I watched as Clara's friends, once admirers, now looked at her with pity or disdain. Her gallery representation was already on the phone, their tone one of urgency and concern. The art world, so quick to elevate, was just as swift to condemn. I had orchestrated this moment, but as I saw the impact, the human cost, a part of me recoiled. This was not just about art or betrayal. It was about lives altered, careers potentially ruined. Yet, the die was cast, the story told through brush and canvas, now a public spectacle. The morning after was a stark contrast to the night before. The gallery, once a place of celebration, now felt like a crime scene. The art left hanging as silent witnesses to the night's revelations. Clara was gone before dawn, her whereabouts unknown to me. I imagined her, perhaps seeking solitude, grappling with the ruins of her career and personal life. The fallout was swift. Clara's name was splashed across newspapers, online blogs, and social media, her talent now overshadowed by scandal. Her upcoming exhibitions were cancelled, her contracts with galleries terminated. Theo faced similar repercussions. His critiques were no longer trusted, his authority in the art world questioned. I received calls from colleagues, some offering support, others condemnation for turning a personal matter into public spectacle. My own position at the museum was now uncertain, my actions seen by some as innovative art critique, by others as vindictive and unethical. In the quiet of our home, now echoing with absence, I reflected on what I had done. I had sought justice, or what I perceived as justice, but at what cost? I had not just ended an affair or exposed a betrayal. I had potentially ended careers, including my own. Months passed, the scandal slowly fading into the background noise of the ever-evolving art world. Clara had moved away, her art now less about the vibrant public scenes and more about introspection. Her work shone under a new name in smaller, more private galleries. There was a new depth to her art, a raw honesty that was born from her fall from grace. Theo had left the city, his career as a critic over, now teaching art in a small college, His influence reduced but his passion for art undiminished. His critiques were now for students, not the public, his life a lesson in humility. As for me, I stepped down from my role at the museum, the scandal having left too large a shadow over my professional life. I turned to creating art again, not for revenge or exposure but for healing. My paintings were different now, less about technique and more about emotion, telling a story of loss, betrayal, and ultimately redemption. I opened a small studio, teaching art to those who saw it not just as a profession but as a path to understanding themselves. In teaching, I found my new beginning, sharing the lessons learned from the darkest chapter of my life. The art of betrayal had given way to the art of healing. In the end, we were all artists in our own right, painting our lives with the colors of our choices, our mistakes, and our recoveries. The exhibition that had once been about revenge was now a distant memory, a story told in whispers among art circles, a cautionary tale of love, art, and the fine line between justice and vengeance.